A number of woke gaming outlets are running defense for Flintlock, the Siege of Dawn, after the game released a demo at the Summer Games Fest that a number of video game, quote, journalists were able to play. And then they have since released a public demo that allows gamers to play as well. And it's very clear that the journalists are really trying to hype this game up, despite it having a lot of problems. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Before we get into what people are saying after playing the demo, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that this game is Sweet Baby Inc. influenced and has been added to the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected Steam curator list, as well as DEI-detected.com by Cabrutus Rambo. He specifically did this, I feel like maybe a couple months ago, and he cited an interview in Edge magazine with the CEO of the game's developer, A44, Audrey Tops Harjo, that confirmed Sweet Baby Inc. CEO Kim Belair's involvement in the game. This is what Edge reported for Flintlock. It was Tops Harjo who brought on Kim Belair, Montreal-based narrative director who has advocated for better representation in stories as a means of bringing new and exciting ideas to games, such as racism against white people. That's literally what Sweet Baby Inc. is all about. Harjo explained, she took the wonderful base layer Derek had, the world, and just elevated it. You know the difference when there's a person who's reflecting at you and it's true. There's a certain truth that resonates that can't be faked. I know some people won't notice, but the people who are attuned to that, they'll get it immediately. So obviously already touting Kim Belair and her narrative crafting of this ultra woke video game. In fact, if you actually go a little bit earlier in the interview here in the screenshot that Cabrutus posted, Harjo actually says this: those gods are almost a symbol of colonialism. They are people who have taken over your agency. What do you do when you wrestle with that structure to find and gain your own identity? It's still a game. It's still gods and guns. But when you look at it from that lens, there's another layer on top of that. From Nor being a woman of color, it makes the character and the dynamic even more an echo of reality. So this game clearly has an agenda. It's going to be preaching to you about colonialism from the perspective of a quote unquote woman of color. So not only does it have Sweet Baby Inc.'s Kim Belair heavily involved in crafting the narrative, but it also, that narrative is literally about pushing the political propaganda of colonialism, which is all the rage in woke circles, especially on college campuses. So not only do we have this game added to the Sweet Baby Inc. detected list and DEI detected, but we also had this alleged rumor here from former World of Warcraft team lead Mark Kerm. He cited an anonymous source who worked on the game or was worked close to the game. And this source says, I used to work there. Flintlock was a good project with lots of potential. Then it was ruined. Kern went on to reveal this. Before I go further, please note this is a rumor from a source that seems very knowledgeable about the studio's inner workings. Take that as it is. If others would like to verify, please DM me anonymously. The CEO and COO at A44 are no longer with the company, but the damage seems to have been done. The good devs at A44, I tell you how to fix it at the end of this thread. And he says, did you know the protagonist of Flintlock used to be white? When COO and casting director Andrea Tops Harjo joined the studio, her first actions were to change the character to hire Sweet Baby Inc. and change the main character to a POC. This marked the beginnings of the problems with the game and studio. He went on and said this. Audrey Tops Harjo is rumored to have used the company's funds and manpower to power her personal agenda and projects on initiatives not related to the game or even the studio itself. One such initiative that I found is Inclusion FX, a VFX company, an advocacy company with shades of Sweet Baby Inc. In fact, Kim Belair actually admits that she wanted to change or take over the video game industry in an interview with Inclusion FX here on YouTube. Here is the bio from the company. She held this position at Flintlock. At the same time, she ran Inclusion FX. He said, I asked and confirmed, yeah, I have witnessed our UI artists making art assets for its website as their sprint tasks. So indicating that A44 artists that were working on this game were also working on the Inclusion FX website. He then said, aside from working with Sweet Baby Inc. and making changes to the game, Audrey also directed numerous changes in HR in her role as COO. In 2021, most developers were denied raises and evaluations were postponed for at least 6 months. Audrey told HR to inform anyone who complained or asked questions that the reasons is because I said so. She also ordered the HR department to hide the salaries of the top executives of the company. HR tried to help, but were unable to get past this. The team was worried about the studio finances. Meanwhile, the new hires and changes to the game resulted in a project where, quote, these people know nothing about how a video game is made. After nearly 2 years of these DEI changes at A44, the damage had been done. At this point, the studio was purchased for $175 million, an unusually high sum for a small studio, by the way, by Kepler Interactive in September of 2021, a gaming collective fund whose founder also founded the Calone Knights Gaming Fund. It was at this point that Audria, the COO, left the company. Perhaps this was the start of a cleanup of the game's troubles. And he then went on to say the state of the game is unknown at this time, but is believed to be in shambles after this 2-year round of DI changes. As we now know, A44 reached out to Cabrutus to refute SBI's involvement, saying they are no longer involved and all their changes reversed. But when Cabrutus asked for proof, they refused to speak to him any further. He then goes on and gives his advice, which they did not take. But after the game was added to the Steam curator list, and we had this report from Kerm, one of the game's senior operations and growth manager for Kepler Interactive, Lissy Kane. She posted this to X. He says, absolutely fuming, vibrating off the effing plane of reality. This piss weak pseudo journalism that the far right Gamergate are taking is so vile, incredible to see in real time and closer to home how wrong Grums is and how damaging he and his weird troop are. So obviously fuming that this game has a spotlight put on it and its involvement with Sweet Baby Inc., which is documented in that interview with Edge magazine. And then, so let's get into these social media outlets. Vera Dark kind of brought this to my attention. She did a really good video on this. If you want to watch that, I'll have the link in the description below. But she pointed to this one here by Stacey Henley, who wrote a piece at The Gamer titled Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn is a hit in need of a crowd. So obviously trying to say that this is a really great game. She really enjoyed the demo, et cetera, but if you actually read the article, you realize that this isn't necessarily the case because she actually concludes the article writing this. Playing it felt like preparing sound bites for a future conversation. I played that at Summer Games Fest once. Yeah, it was all right. That doesn't sound like a hit at all to me. Clearly lying in the headline there if you think that the game was just all right and not actually a hit. Shame it never really found its crowd. I hope I'm wrong because there's a lot to like about Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn. But just a month out from release, I find myself fearful of its future. So clearly describing it as just all right is literally not a hit. So clearly trying to dupe people by the headline. And if you actually get to the end of the article, admission that the game isn't as good as what the headline says. So clearly trying to run defense and hype this game up, trying to squeeze as many sales out of this from their woke audience as they can. We also saw this from David Smith at Kotaku Australia. He also attempted to hype up the game. Ironically, he compared it to Square Enix's epic failure for Spoken, which we eventually found out that Square Enix had to shut down Luminous Productions, the game's developer, and it was absorbed back into Square Enix following that epic failure. This is what his headline read on Kotaku Australia. Flintlock Siege of Dawn looks like Forspoken, but actually good this time. So he says it looks like Forspoken, but actually good this time. I'm seeing spells and guns, which are obviously two great tastes that taste great together. That's a terrible sentence. Using taste too many times. But there's also quite a bit of vertically and dexterous character movement, which is always great to see. It's also described as a Souls-light, which I appreciate. If you actually read the article, which I did, I'm not going to go over everything here, but it has absolutely zero information on the story or narrative. He literally just talks about the gameplay, which I think is telling. It's almost a lie by omission, not revealing anything about the story. I would assume you would have at least garnered something of the story in the demo that you played, not just the gameplay. And obviously, this is a tactic that a lot of propagandists will use. They will make a quote-unquote high-quality game as far as gameplay, as far as the technical aspects of it, but it's the narrative, it's the story is where they will be pushing the agenda. And we know that Kim Belair literally did indeed do that, as confirmed by Harjo in that Edge magazine interview. So we did get this also from Brad Norton. He actually kind of takes a shot at the actual game mechanics and the tech as well and how it actually plays. I actually feel like he kind of provides more of an honest review of his demo. So I wouldn't really put him in the kind of like that woke shill aspect, because his headline actually says Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, a competent Souls-like with a rough demo. So very kind of tempering expectations, just describing it as competent, and then saying that the demo is really rough. And he writes in the actual article, he says the game ultimately feels a little rough around the edges, unable to hone in on any particular strength. In one moment, I was firing off explosives, easily knocking down foes from afar. In another, a single enemy took me out of action in 2 strikes. Then I found myself in the middle of a platforming-based puzzle. It was all a bit jumbled together with little in the way of proper direction. So that just sounds just really kind of chaotic and terrible. He then noted that he actually began avoiding combat in the game. He says, before long, even in the brief hands-on window, I found myself simply ignoring most enemies. With multiple sprawling paths forward, I found it more effective to just avoid combat altogether, sprinting through areas to get to the next step in the quest. Though I'm not entirely sure that's how the game is meant to be played. So pointing out that he's just done with kind of the combat and just moving forward and skipping it all together, when that's probably supposed to be how you're actually supposed to play it. So noting that there's a major design flaw there. He then concluded saying this: it seems to be a competent enough Souls-like with a bit of added flair, but its limitations are also quite evident, existing in that AA space and presenting decently enough, but not being quite as epic in scope or dazzling with its visuals to draw folks in. It's a bit of a tough sell. So even he is saying, even not even talking about Sweet Baby Inc. or the narrative or any kind of a wokeness that has been injected into this game, he even says it's going to be just a tough sell on its gameplay mechanics, which is what he kind of focuses on, and gameplay design in his kind of review of the demo. So that's that. We also have this here. I'm going to jump over here. This is IGN. Their headline is Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn is genuinely an Elden Ring and God of War mashup. The challenge of a Souls-like with the cinematic flair of a Sony first party. So obviously, really hyping this game up is what IGN is trying to do. However, like all the others, there's some interesting stuff here. I think this is probably the shilliest that I've seen this Matt Purslow here. Obviously, it's from the UK. All these people from the UK, they're like the biggest shills. Like you always find that the biggest shills usually come from the UK. Not to say there aren't big shills here in the US. Obviously, Alyssa Mercanti at Mercanti or at Kotaku is obviously probably the biggest, but more often than not, you see a lot of the super woke, the super shills. They usually are coming from the UK. But this guy he goes so far, it says FPS games were largely considered Doom clones until games like GoldenEye and Half-Life reconsider what first-person shooting could be. Flintlock, if it's everything it promises, could well be part of the vanguard that makes Souls-likes much more than just Dark Souls copies. So clearly trying to describe this game as some kind of revolutionary game, really hyping it up, despite we have other people basically saying that it's mediocre. Gameplay design isn't that great. Gameplay mechanics aren't that great. And then they don't even talk about the narrative at all whatsoever. And we know that that is ultra woke, as confirmed in that Edge magazine. And then what really kind of exposes this IGN review here is if you actually go to the Steam community page for Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, you can see they're actually removing a number of threads discussing Sweet Baby Inc. here. And then even if you look into some of these general discussion threads here that are on the top, like this one right here, seriously, what dev binds on shift, but sprint on control. So calling out kind of, again, gameplay design here. I guess that's what you would call that, and how you bind the keys. And then this one here says terrible performance on Steam Deck, jittery animations, not hitting 30 frames per second. This game would be playable at 30 frames per second, but the damn performance is so bad. This game would be some serious would need some serious optimization, but I can see it working for the deck. There's another one here. I would like to thank the developers right away for the long demo. If I use fixation on any enemy and there's at least one more enemy or explosive barrel in my field of vision, there's just terrible chaos on the screen since my fixation moves from enemy to barrel and then to the next enemy and so on constantly. Since switching to another target occurs by moving the mouse left or right, the function in the settings switching with the mouse to another target is not disabled. So obviously, again, pointing out a lot of issues with the gameplay and the gameplay mechanics here. Some of these reviews, and a lot of them are like that. Here's another one. Game's okay, but serious issues with enemy placement. Bug in the demo. Hole in the train during tutorial. And then here's another one for performance. I'd like to thank you for offering the demo a decent time before launch. I'll only speak to technical issues before the rest is opinion. I like it enough to buy. The only main issue I had so far was crashing. I played for about 15 minutes, no problem. Then went into the settings and disabled DLSS to see how it would run at native 4K on my machine. The game crashed as soon as I came out of the settings, and it crashed upon hitting the continue button every time I tried. So lots of negative feedback here for the game, especially when it comes to the gameplay and game design, kind of exposing these woke journalists and their demo time that they had at Summer Games Fest. But I think this game is dead on arrival. The fact that it has Sweet Baby Inc. involved is proof of that. The fact that you have one of the operations managers just absolutely raging immediately after it was added to the Sweet Baby Inc. detected Steam curator list and kind of had some of its inner workings exposed, I think is all proof that you need that this game will definitely be pushing the Sweet Baby Inc. and woke agenda and should die on the vine. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.